Good evening, everybody. It's Carpo again on a video talking about random stuff. Go figure, right? Well, that's what I do. And every time I tell myself, I'm just gonna, maybe not make videos for a while. And I always end up making one. A few months back, I don't know, some of my subs might remember I actually quit for I hung up for like 5 days. On the fifth day, I finally logged back in and had like so many messages I couldn't answer them, and it was one of those breakaway from the internet weeks. And anyway, I've come to the conclusion in my life that I'm just going to utilize that tool while it's here. The internet is something that a lot of people have become addicted to, in the sense that it's not about how much time you spend on there. It's about, I guess, depends on what you want to consider an addiction, I guess. I mean, if you are, for me, making videos is, I guess you could call it a passion. You could call it a compulsion, if you wanted. You could call it an addiction. But many of these things are difficult to distinguish from each other. Um, if I had some regular, like let's say my YouTube channel was, maybe I did stick figure drawings or something, whatever, just an art thing, I might be more like, well, okay, I got to do something different. But the fact that I can open up and talk about different things every day is priceless to me. I mean, I can't stress that enough. Like, there was a time when it was difficult for us to find people to talk to, like-minded people, and I kind of wanted to mention, or at least talk for a second about the search, the search that everyone has, whatever their life they're searching for. It's not always a search. Sometimes it's just hanging on to things, or like trying to keep their way of life. Say they have money and they want to keep their money, or uh, you know, they're comfortable where they're at and they don't want to change that. That becomes very standard way of living for today's society. But for those of us who are actually looking to change constantly, and moving forward, um, it can be a difficult path because, and this is where I can only speak from my own personal experience, that it seems like whenever you're doing a lot of deep mental work, it's very difficult to break away from that and go do mundane things like everyday jobs, tasks around the house, things you need to get done. In other words, I have to go through phases where I'm getting things done and then phases where I'm doing personal work. So it's external work, internal work, and it's very difficult to keep them together. It's like when you get into a mode or a routine, when you're in work mode you go, go, go. And when you're in think mode you think, think, think. And this is how it is for me anyway. I was fortunate as a carpenter that I was able to work for a while by myself, or at least I worked with a couple other guys, but I was doing mostly working by myself all day. Last year, for about a year, so back February of 2013 to February 2014 or something. And for a majority of that time, I wore my headphones at work every day. And all I listened to was Manly P. Hall, Alan Watts, and the Teaching Company, philosophy lectures. I loaded up my SD card with like 10 gigabytes of audio lectures and just listened every day on random. Eventually I had to start going in order because I was getting repeats, and anyway, when I was in that phase, that was one point in my life where I was able to actually work and be learning at the same time. But that's a very rare thing because most people have to be paying attention, listen to the boss, hear for the machines, it's hard to really pay attention and focus. So I would lose a lot even when I was working because I was thinking of measurements and stuff like that. But that year of my life, I feel like many of the ones I listened to were actually courses, like college courses in various subjects, like basically any type of philosophy, all the different people and their philosophies, as well as all the different ideas, free will, determinism, and all that, came to a very important conclusion after looking at all those things, which was that some arguments are just not worth the time, and some searches are not worth the time. One I found that was not worth the time was the idea of free will. And it just seems like a futile, useless debate to me. And I don't mean that. The people who are interested in the free will debates, I mean, I respect you. That's a tough one, they've done a lot of scientific experiments where they've found that the brain starts to act before we actually make a decision, leading all these people to hypothesize that, things are predetermined. For me, it's just irrelevant. It's not a matter of whether we are or aren't. It's not going to change the outcome by knowing the answer. This is the key point that I've found to everything that I study, everything that I'm involved in, every single thing that I take the time to learn, because if I'm going to break away and take the time to learn, I want to make sure it's something that actually has a purpose, that will resolve something for me, that will get me to think deeper, or something that can be determined. It's great to have ideals. We all have to be idealists, but for those ideals to be realized, often we have to look the whole system through to say, hey, am I putting my time into the right thing here? Am I dedicating my studies to the, what matters? Better make sure I'm not out of time here. So I wanted to say that, as far as philosophy goes, it's probably the most important study that I've ever done. All types of philosophy, but it's not a study, it's just a way of life. Philosophy, it's love and wisdom. But wisdom isn't a matter of gaining knowledge. It's a huge difference. See, wisdom is not knowledge. So philosophy is something that builds over time, and I've wondered sometimes if it's even, people say it's not even worth the time, to think too much about things, but for me that's where my heart's at. And I had something else I wanted to say. I wish I could remember what it was. It had to do with philosophy, of course. Oh, well, I guess I just wanted to finish up about what I was saying about how everything that I analyze, I see if it's going to actually make an impact or change things in my life, and if it doesn't, I move it and get rid of it. When it comes to living like the monks did, or like the actual old style teachings where people would go into these, groups and have these altars and these big rooms and spend all these days in meditation. We just can't do that today, at least not in the Western world. It's not feasible for most people, and even if it were, we don't have the right types of gurus and the proper settings to do these things. Nor does it really relate to our modern day, and that's the thing. It's like we've moved past many of the old archetypes they used, and kind of we have our new ones, and we continue to make up new ideas for what life means every year. New theories on what God is and what matter is, but all of that we have to ask ourselves is, how does it serve us? Are we going to gain anything from this? So I wanted to just say that, philosophy is when I was younger, I thought philosophy meant you went to school and learned philosophy. I didn't know any better, And now looking back on that, I realize that's the view a lot of people probably have. That's what it means, is to learn about the old philosophers. All of that is garbage, other than learning what the philosophies were from these people, learning about their particular lives and details of the debates they had are really irrelevant. You want to get the meat. You want the meat, You don't want to piddle around with taking a class of philosophy, although it opens up doors. I guess what I'm saying is you could take 4 years of philosophy in college and never be a philosopher. It's the brain that does the work, not you don't learn how to do it. camera always cuts me off in the middle and I just lose my train of thought. But anyway, philosophy is not for the weak. It's not for the weak-minded, but it's for everyone in the sense that if you are weak-minded and you begin learning philosophy, spending time understanding yourself, you won't be weak-minded anymore. And that's really the point, that it's for everyone. You know, it's one of those things that you can't set yourself aside from it and say, well, there's philosophers, and then there's me, I just think about stuff. You know, basically put it this way, if you've considered more than a few times where you come from and where you're going, and you're open-minded about it, and you think about it more than a few minutes, you're a philosopher. I mean, these are the issues that we take for granted and assume that others aren't thinking, but after asking around, you see that others are thinking, or aren't thinking that what you think they are. Like many of us who think a lot and process a lot of different ideas and theories, we don't bounce them off of people in daily life, so we don't know. We assume other people are deep in thought, but no, they're thinking about bread, or they're, you know, arguing with their wife or whatnot. And I don't really mean to belittle people in general, but the fact is that most people aren't interested in deep thinking. It's just a fact. Statistically, people just don't have much interest for deep philosophy or rational thinking, for trying to solve the world's problems. It's kind of just get to the next day. And that to me is the biggest waste of time and waste of life. And it's an abuse of your own soul, your own energy to like just live without doing something. It doesn't mean that you have to be a seeker or you have to seek knowledge and think a lot. That's not what I mean. Each person has to be of service to the world. So you can't hide away. You can serve through being a parent. You can serve through helping others. I'm really hoping that I can get into public speaking someday and try to help people, or maybe get into like helping youth, you know, who are you know, abused or who've had tough lives, because the little things can change a person, and that's really, you know, who am I to say I can change a person? That's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying that there's a huge difference between telling people, hey, this is what you should believe and this will make you happy, or doing what I try to do, which is saying this is what works for me. If you find your own truth, it'll work for you. And that's the approach I would use for that type of counseling or whatnot, you know. And I guess what I'm saying is I care about people. I really give a shit. And it's difficult to express and convey sometimes. Because I care about people, but at the same time, I get frustrated with the ignorance. I mean, I can't, I have a very short fuse when it comes, I have a low tolerance for people doing stupid things. And I think that everything's okay. And then I go out in public, get in the car, go driving, and everything's fine until somebody does something dumb. Such as somebody waiting for like 4 cars to pull out so they can get the parking spot they want, that kind of stuff. People just abuse the privilege of being human. They feel entitled to certain things. And I'm always the guy who will just get out of the way, park in the back of the lot, mind my own business, try to follow the laws. And I realize this, you know. In my mind, I'm a rebel, you know, against the whole system. But I follow all the laws and rules in this system. At least the ones that the people had any say in. Other than, you know, yeah, I smoked pot when I wasn't supposed to. I eat mushrooms and they're illegal. Other than substances, but general laws, you know, I try to follow them as much as possible, and I try to, because I want to follow the will of my society. And I guess being able to see the difference between the lies and the truth is difficult. And along the way, you know, we do many things to ourselves that, you know, as much as we think that we're doing great for ourselves, we do things that maybe we shouldn't do, you know, or things that are harmful to our health, right? You know, everybody does it once in a while. Everybody does something they know they shouldn't do. Not me, though. I mean, I've always been totally on the level. I never make mistakes. I never make mistakes. In fact, I can't think of the last time that I did something that was harmful to my health, or that hurt my brain, or that hurt my body or my blood. Everything I do is just perfect. I'm a perfect human being. Yeah. Anyway, for those who for those who have never taken a nitrous hit, that's why I took that nitrous hit. In other words, a few of you were like, yeah, nitrous. A few of you were like, what? What's he doing? And a few of you were like, you're an idiot. You're destroying your brain cells. I thought that that would be a perfect addition to this this little thing about, being honest with yourself. I used to go to Grateful Dead shows. I went to about 12 of them before Jerry died. And I think 10 before Jerry died, then 2 after. Whew, that was a good buzz, man. Laughing gas is fun. I remember the first time I went to a Dead show and you'd hear this. What's that? You walk up and there's the back of this trailer and this dude's got like a, nitrous tanks in there and they're just filling these balloons up. They just got tons. People lined up. Buy a balloon for like $5. Huge balloon and, pass it around. Everybody gets a good toke off it. It was fun. And nitrous isn't a healthy thing. Of course not. But they use a hell of a lot more than the average person uses to get a buzz. And like the dentist office uses a lot more than that, and the doctor's office uses a hell of a lot more than that. It's a consistent pull as opposed to just one puff. But it's a rare thing for me. I go to the head shop, and I was at the this little Asian market down the street the other day on my way home from Goodwill, which is another one of my addictions, and found they have all these pipes in the back, and they had the thing of nitrous cartridges. I was like, I got it, and I'll just buy one. I got the big old cracker here, and it's just a rare thing that I do. In fact, honestly, I drink alcohol maybe twice a year, and I do nitrous maybe twice a year, as far as like buying a thing of them and doing them. And that's one of those rare treats. But then again, I smoke cannabis every day. And that's another thing. You don't try to justify to yourself that what you do is safe. Because cannabis can be harmful too, smoking it. And yeah, I do some tobacco products too. Things are harmful, but I'm honest with myself and I'm working towards being a better me. Which means that I can't beat myself up. I'll just be honest, Probably almost out of time here. I got a minute. So, we all do our thing. We all do what we do. In fact, I watched a show about addictions, and this lady, it was a UK show, some documentary, and this lady followed these different people around that had different addictions. One of, there was a couple that had sex addiction. One guy was actually addicted to nitrous. He'd do it all the time with his friends. And they asked him, he said he did it because it was legal. And he didn't want to do anything illegal. It's like, what a dumbass. Doing it like 2 or 3 times a week, that's a lot more than, I would care to do it. But it has its place and it is fun and nobody can judge others. And it seems like people are always judging others' addictions as if theirs are less harmful. In other words, it's the guy that's sitting there eating McDonald's telling you that you shouldn't be smoking pot, or vice versa, and we think that we're holier than thou with our particular, things that we do or don't do. And maybe there are some people out there who have it perfect. And I know that there are people out there who have no addictions as far as, substances, people who have really found that true complete comfort within. I would assume that they're out there and that don't have any doubts or worries ever, that are in that Zen-like state. That's awesome. I hope I get there one day, but I'm not there yet. So for now, I work on myself and my world, and hopefully it all works out. So far it has. Hope everybody has a fine evening. Namaste.